Kabayan, have you ever heard the saying, you really don't know what is going on behind closed doors? Well, that is certainly true of the case that I want to share with you today. So make sure that you follow and engage with this video so that you get more Filipino true crime content from my page. And yeah, let's get into this. This is a story of Maria Evelyn Sayos. Now, in 2016, in Villa Luisa Homes, Dasmariñas, Cavite, there lived a 54-year-old woman named Maria Evelyn Sayos. She was widowed. She was a single mother of two, and her daughter was Joanna Marie. Her son was John Michael. Her husband died when the kids were still very young, and from then on, it was just Evelyn, the kids versus life. You know, she worked hard like so many Filipino single moms. The small house in Cavite was basically a result of years of sacrifice and hard work by Evelyn. On top of that, her husband left her a small asset, you know, like not really a luxurious property in Singapore, but nonetheless, it was a bit of a financial security for the family. Not that they get to go there all the time, but it was good to know that they had that. People who knew Evelyn described her as loving, religious, traditional, and very focused on her children and also on her work. She was also what many Filipinos would call strict, very conservative, easily stressed, sometimes overbearing, especially with her daughter. If you grew up with a boomer Filipino mom, you probably know the type, especially if you're a millennial like me. They love you, but I also want to control you, and they lecture you, and they worry too much, and they worry very loudly. All the love to you though, boomer Filipino moms, Filipino boomer moms. Like, you grew up the way that you grew up. But yeah, it was definitely an experience growing up with a Filipino boomer mom. So inside their home, you can already see some differences. We've got John Michael. He was the calmer and more mature of the two siblings. And then we've got Joanna. She was the classic pasaway, rebellious teenager who liked to party, to drink, and to just like, I don't know, be a rebellious teenager, I suppose. And this caused a lot of tension between mother and daughter. They argued a lot. Evelyn wanted obedience, wanted respect, and Joanna wanted freedom. You know, over time, the daily nagging and shouting and fighting became normal in that house. Things escalated when Joanna got pregnant at 16, and the father was her boyfriend, Ronald James Ruby. Now, for Evelyn, a conservative Catholic, this was a huge disappointment and a source of embarrassment. But like many Filipino moms, yeah, she expressed her disappointment and she was definitely embarrassed, and she lectured her daughter and the boyfriend. But in the end, she did not abandon her daughter. She did not leave her out, you know, to dry or whatever however the saying goes. She stepped in and said, well, I'm gonna help you raise this child. So she did. She helped care for her grandchild, and she allowed Ronald to move in. And the home now had the following people. We've got Evelyn, we've got Joanna, we've got Ronald, we've got the baby, and we've got John Michael, who did not really live there anymore full time, but would visit occasionally. And this is what rubs me the wrong way, okay? Instead of feeling grateful and like maybe relieved that Evelyn was not like, you know, throwing them out of the home, Joanna and Ronald started depending on Evelyn for everything, but also being extremely grateful, ungrateful, not grateful, especially whenever Evelyn reminded them that they needed to pull their own weight, reminded Ronald James to maybe find a job as the dad of this new child. Both of these, you know, teenagers did not work. They did not contribute to the household chores. Well, they did not contribute to the household chores. And they did not contribute financially. And they often left the baby in Evelyn's care because they continued to do their own teenage stuff like partying, you know. Evelyn became the only breadwinner and the main caregiver for the child, basically starting motherhood all over again, something that she had already done like decades ago. But this time there were more mouths to feed, more bills to pay, and less energy to give because she was older. Inevitably, the arguments grew worse. Evelyn thought she was guiding them, you know, pushing Ronald to get a job, as I said, criticizing Joanna's parenting, asking her to step up as a mother. But to the young couple, they received that very, very differently. They said, oh, she was nagging too much. You know, she's judging us, and she's also shaming us. Their frontal lobes were not developed enough to understand that Evelyn just wanted something good for them, and they needed to take responsibility and accountability. But you know what? Teenagers. By 2016, the tension was just unbearable in that house. According to later reports and statements, Ronald was the one who started talking about a more permanent solution to what they perceived as the problem. And the problem was Evelyn, okay? So he fed his girlfriend a narrative that Evelyn was the problem, that if she was gone, they would have the house, they would have freedom, they would have quiet, silence, and they would have peace. And for someone like Joanna, who really valued her freedom and just wanted to be a teenager, and she was tired of conflict and responsibilities, this poison was, settling in really, really nicely. She was fertile ground for this poison. So the two began discussing how to get rid of the mother, and investigators later said that it was not a sudden explosion of anger. This was discussed. This was meticulously planned. Premeditated, if you. On the 20th of August 2016, the plan finally went into action. Joanna told her mother that she had a surprise for her in the lower area or basement part of their home. Now, given their rocky relationship, Evelyn might have seen this as an attempt at peace, or at least she was, a little bit curious as to what her daughter was trying to show her there, So she followed her daughter, and waiting in the shadows was Ronald, and he was holding a hammer. As Evelyn came down into this basement part of their house, Ronald attacked her from behind, striking her in the head multiple times. Evelyn then collapsed. She was already very badly injured at this point, but she wasn't dead yet. Then came the part that shocked even the most seasoned investigators of this crime. Ronald handed Joanna, his girlfriend, Evelyn's daughter, a knife and told her to finish it. So Joanna stabbed her mother several times, and the autopsy showed all this. Specifically, the autopsy showed that there were multiple skull fractures from hammer blows. There were stab wounds in the neck and chest, and there was a deep cut on her arm, on Evelyn's arm, likely from trying to defend herself. After years of screaming matches and arguments in that little home in Dasmariñas, Cavite, the conflict inside that house ended in extreme morbid violence delivered by the daughter, who was raised alone by this mother, and also by this boyfriend that this mother had taken into her home. So now Ronald and Joanna had the home to themselves. Behind the home, or connected to it, there was an unfinished septic tank, just FYI. And that would become Evelyn's grave. They dragged her body there, dumped her inside the tank, and then Ronald went to a local hardware store to buy cement, sand, and gravel, as if he was just doing some DIY renovation at their home. Now, neighbors recalled seeing him mixing cement, but nobody really suspected anything bad of it, right? It just looked like, they were just doing some construction. Now, they sealed the septic tank with cement. Eventually, that area would be under the kitchen floor, near the kitchen floor. But you cannot hide a decomposing body. And so at some point, the smell started escaping. Gases would build up under the concrete, and, the kitchen floor started cracking up, and then Ronald and Joanna had to put more and more layers of cement to hide the scent. So every time the floor cracked, they poured more cement, literally layering lies over this horrible truth that they have hidden. Welcome back, Kabayan. This is part 2 of the Evelyn Sayos case. So now they're done with murdering Evelyn Sayos, and they've hidden her in the septic tank. But now they have to come up with a story as to why she was suddenly absent from their home in Dasmariñas, Cavite. So right after the murder, Joanna and Ronald told family members and friends that Evelyn had flown to Singapore after another big argument with them. She supposedly left in anger, and she went off to Singapore to clear her head. Because she really did own a property in Singapore, the story was easy to sell. But soon people were like, this does not really seem like something Evelyn would do, because first of all, Evelyn is not the impulsive type. So just to leave, even in anger, seemed very out of character. And then there were the social media posts. Evelyn had always been active on Facebook, right? Her posting Style was described as warm and chatty, full of emojis, full of pictures and mentions of friends, and she was willing to do calls and video chats, and all of that after the 20th of August, 2016 was just like gone. Okay. The tone was off. The structure of the post was off. There were no pictures anymore. There were, severe lack of emojis as well. So people noticed the difference and they were beginning to question and suspect because something just didn't sit right. But her Facebook account stayed active all throughout this time. The post remained very stiff and oddly formal. Like I said, no more pictures, not even airport pictures. There were no pictures of Singapore. And most importantly, there were no more video calls. Family members who were based abroad, who were based in Singapore, offered to meet her up in person, said let's grab some coffee. But there was always an excuse. Oh, can't do. She was always busy. She was sick. She was traveling. And the woman typing from that account just did not sound like Evelyn, because really it wasn't. It was Joanna this whole time pretending to be her mother, using social media to basically maintain this lie that her mother was still alive. Now, there was one person who could not really accept that his mother would just fly off to Singapore on a whim. John Michael grew suspicious, and after 2 years of suspecting that something was wrong, he finally said, you know what, enough is enough. I'm reporting this to the police. He submitted a missing persons report. Now, the authorities, and I'm not surprised, and listeners to my podcast will not be surprised, the authorities were hesitant at first. On paper, it looked like, listen, her passport, was supposedly missing. Her clothes were allegedly gone. Her Facebook account is active. It looks like she's just really traveling, to the overstretched, underpaid, overworked police forces. It looked like a woman who had chosen to leave a very toxic situation for maybe a better life in Singapore. But John Michael was relentless. He did not stop. He kept pushing and insisting that this was not his mom. Whoever is posting on his mom's Facebook page was not his mom. It would take another 2 years for something to happen in this case. At this point, we were in the middle of pandemic. And the only reason that this case was, blown wide open, is that how the saying goes, was because some renovations were done within the Sayos home. In July 2020, almost 4 years after Evelyn supposedly left, John Michael decided to repair and renovate the kitchen. The floor had been cracking again and again, and he was just not happy about this. He wanted the house to look nice, still hoping that one day his mom would come and would be happy with the renovations that were being made. So construction workers started to move in, and they started digging into the floor. They noticed layers and layers of cement, really, really weird. And they also noticed a foul smell escaping from beneath the kitchen floor. At first, they thought, oh, this is just a sewage, nothing to write home about. But as they dug deeper, they found something that changed everything. First, they found Evelyn's passport and identification cards buried under the kitchen. If Evelyn's passport was under the floor, this means she never left the country. The Singapore story immediately collapsed in 1 second. The police were called in. They opened up the sealed septic tank area, and inside they found human remains curled in a tight space, heavily decomposed after nearly 4 years. Forensic analysis then confirmed that the body was that of Maria Evelyn Sayos. Even in that heavily decomposed state, examiners could see the evidence of the extreme violence she suffered. She had skull fractures, stab wounds, and defensive injuries. So with the body, being recovered from the property, plus the passport and the IDs, the focus now immediately turned to Joanna and Ronald. Their story about Evelyn leaving for Singapore and living in Singapore no longer made sense, So under questioning, they were confronted with everything that the investigators so far uncovered. And eventually they confessed. They admitted that they planned the murder. They lured Evelyn downstairs with a fake surprise. That Ronald hit her with a hammer, that Joanna stabbed her with a knife, that they dumped the body into the unfinished septic tank. They sealed it with cement, and they used Evelyn's Facebook for years to pretend that she was, enjoying life in Singapore. Now, after that, thankfully, Both were charged with murder and parricide. So both were charged with murder, but Joanna there was an extra charge of parricide because, killing your parents, killing a family member is considered as parricide in the Philippines. And the legal process since, even though we want it to be really quick because they confess and there was so much evidence, the legal process has been very, very slow. And who is surprised? If you've been a longtime listener of this podcast, you know that this is something that occurs every time in cases, despite overwhelming evidence against the defendant. Also, what's frustrating is that there's just a lack of public records about what's going on in these cases, especially with this one. What is clear, though, thankful to a Medium article that I have used as reference for making this video, is that their 4-year cover-up eventually failed, and they are going to prison for this, thanks to a son that was just so diligent and so relentless in making sure that he knew what was going on, that something was not lining up, and he did something about it. Now, going back to the whole justice system being so dysfunctional, like I read somewhere, it might have been the same Medium article, that despite the overwhelming evidence and despite the fact that they were awaiting their trial, these two were actually let out on temporary liberty or whatever you call it. And everybody was just like, why? Why did the judge allow this to happen, knowing that they're awaiting trial and there are literally murder charges against these two, Victim advocacy groups were very, very mad about this. And I think from what I have read so far, the trial has not even started yet. So we still don't know what is going on. And it has been 4 years since the arrest and the charges. My heart goes out to family and friends of Evelyn, because they have been waiting for justice to be served here. And somehow, justice delayed, and my mother always said, justice delayed is justice denied. And you know what? True. The case of Maria Evelyn Sayos is not just about a brutal killing. It is about how resentment inside a home can quietly escalate to something really serious like murder. How social media can be weaponized to hide a crime, which is something that is so disturbing to me, especially with the rise of AI in our social media networks. And this crime also showed how our instincts about the people that we know, the people that we love, are often more accurate than the evidence that is being presented to us at face value. Like if you doubt something because you just know how your loved one normally acts, maybe trust that instinct more and let it lead you, because just like John Michael, it might lead you to actually solve a crime. Now, I want to hear from you, want to read from you what you think of this story. Is there something that I've missed about this story? Is there any additional information that I may not have, read about? Maybe the trial has started and I just couldn't find anything. Let me know in the comments section. And if you have any other stories that you would like me to cover, make sure to check my podcast first, because I have 5 years worth of content there. Filipino true crime cases. But if you think that I have not covered the case that you would like me to cover on the podcast and on here, please let me know in the comment section. And yeah, till next time, paalam kabayan.